thinking, feeling, doing. These three things sum up the entire way you and I live our lives. It's what forms our perspective. And fun fact, it's basically the Wizard of Oz. The Scarecrow needs a brain, the Tin Man needs a heart, and the Lion needs some guts. And you need all three if you're gonna wake up and realize who you are. In the Enneagram world, we call these the Triad centers or the Triadic Self. There's the head center, which is responsible for your mental clarity, the heart center, which is responsible for your emotional stability, and the gut center, which is responsible for your physical vitality. And one of the most important things you should know about your Enneagram type is which triad center you're primarily influenced by, which center you fall back on, and which center you tend to repress or have spent the least amount of time cultivating. And if you're into the whole Enneagram tritypes thing, that essentially comes from this theory, which I first learned from Drs. Rizzo and Hudson of the Enneagram Institute. All right, let's get into it. All right, what you're gonna notice right away about my whiteboard here is this shorthand I have, which is TFD. That just stands for thinking, which is the head center, feeling, which is the heart center, and doing, which is the body center. So each Enneagram type is gonna have a different pattern with those three different triad centers. The type 1 reformer's primary triad is the gut or body center, their secondary triad is the heart center, and their repressed triad is the head center. The general way this plays out for ones is that they are defined by taking action on their convictions. And convictions are like deeply rooted beliefs that transcend all logic and emotion because they stem from our gut instincts. We just know what the right thing to do is. And remember, the body or gut is all about doing. But ones under stress stop trusting their gut instincts and fall back on the emotions of the heart center. And 99% of the time, their emotion of choice is anger. Ones get this artificial sense of clarity when they're angry. And when they have clarity, they can go back to taking action. Lastly, when ones really aren't doing well, they lose touch with both their instincts and their emotions and become overwhelmed by the racing, anxious thoughts of the neglected head center. Average ones only use the head center to rationalize their emotional attachments to their beliefs, but they don't actually spend time cultivating a calm, quiet mind that is open to new perspectives or challenging experiences. All right, that's type 1. Let's move on to type 2. The type 2 helper's primary triad is the heart center, their secondary triad is the gut center, and their repressed triad is the head center. The general way this plays out for 2s is that they want to do their feelings rather than feel their feelings. 2s are plagued by a sense of needing to earn love, so they're huge acts of service people. It's incredibly difficult for 2s to feel something and then not do something in response to those feelings. The problem with this is that average 2s neglect the gifts of the head center, which provides you with objectivity and clarity. So when they act out emotionally and things go wrong, they're so full of shame that they tend to fall back on this wonky logic of the head center to rationalize whatever they've done, which makes them very stubborn and defensive during conflicts. 2s are also notoriously bad at self-care, and that's because the instinct to protect ourselves comes from the gut center, which is skewed by all the 2s' emotional attachments to the needs of other people. So to sum it all up again, the triadic pattern for 2s is to feel something, do something, then rationalize something. Ultimately, 2s get healthy by practicing stillness and letting their dark, critical thoughts come to the surface, and then slowly learning to accept their full range of emotions without doing anything. All right, next up is the type 3 achiever. All right, here's the basic triadic pattern for the type 3 achiever. 3s are smack dab in the middle of the heart triad between type 2 helpers and type 4 individualists, which means they're the impinged type. The way this plays out for 3s is that they essentially are split into two halves. 3s completely compartmentalize their feelings, and instead they live in a combination of the head and gut centers, which is thinking and doing. So 3s go back and forth between two modes, if you will, feeling mode and functioning mode. Functioning mode feels great to type 3s, and they look competent, capable, and very professional. But when 3s finally slide into that feeling mode, they're almost incapable of functioning. They're so rooted in the heart center that when their emotions come on, it's like a tidal wave that just paralyzes them. And depending on their level of health, they may really hate this because their whole identity is wrapped up in what they can accomplish and how efficient they can be, which again, is that functioning mode of thinking and doing. When 3s are healthy, it's usually because they've embraced a regular therapeutic practice that involves facing their emotions and finding an identity rooted in something other than a flawless reputation. All right, that's type 3. Let's go on to type 4. The primary triad for the type 4 individualist is the heart center. Their secondary triad is the head center, and their repressed triad is the gut or body center. The general way this plays out for type 4s is that they become overly identified with their emotions. They feel, therefore they matter. And if feelings were to go away, then they wouldn't matter. Shame, significance, and emotion are all trademarks of the heart triad. Now, when 4s start to feel lost or numb, they fall back into their imagination, aka the head center, in order to create an artificial reality to simulate whatever experience will trigger their emotion of choice, be it positive or even negative emotion. And that leads us to the gut or body center, which 4s tend to neglect the most. Our gut instincts typically drive us to be physically healthy and grounded in the present moment, but unhealthy 4s subvert these instincts and abuse their body in order to numb their experience of the present moment. Healthy 4s have usually learned to stay physically disciplined in order to avoid getting lost in their imagination and prevent their turbulent emotions from dictating their entire life's trajectory. All right, that's type 4. Time to move on to the type 5 investigator. The primary triad for type 5 investigators is the head center. Their secondary triad is the heart center, and their repressed triad is the gut or body center. The way this plays out for type 5s is that they are emotionally attached to their ideas, information, and the quest for knowledge. So much so that they can totally neglect their physical well-being. 5s believe that information will keep them safe, and so they spend the most amount of their time cultivating their ability to think and perceive. But information alone can be boring, so 5s learn that tying the emotions of the heart center to the thoughts of the head center can keep you motivated and interested long after you've become tired with a certain topic. And that leads us to their repressed triad, which is the gut or body triad. Unhealthy 5s are so cerebral that the body almost feels unnecessary, and so they ignore their food, their sleep, their hygiene, and even their homes can become a total disaster zone. But 5s stay healthy by committing to an exercise routine of some kind, getting emotionally involved with at least a few trusted friends or family members, and then they can fully enjoy the benefits of their rich mental lives. All right, that's type 5 in a nutshell. Let's go on to the type 6 loyalist. All right, here's the basic triadic pattern for the type 6 loyalist. 6s are smack dab in the middle of the head triad between type 5 investigators and type 7 enthusiasts, which means they are the impinged type. Impinged types have the hardest time unlocking the gifts of their respective triad, and in this case, that would be the gifts of a quiet mind and a clear sense of direction. 6s experience the thinking center as totally cut off from the heart center and gut centers, so they essentially shift between two modes, thinking mode and what I'll call active duty mode. Average 6s get pretty stuck in the analysis paralysis of the mind, and so they switch into this mixture of the heart and the body, which creates this sense of clear moral responsibility. This is why they're called the loyalist, because they respond to their lack of analytical clarity and anxiety by just devoting themselves entirely to other people or stronger, bigger organizations that dictate how they should live and what they should do. However, healthy 6s have found the courage necessary to sit with the discomfort of their racing mind long enough to learn how to quiet those thoughts and choose the best, bravest path forward. All right, that's type 6. Let's move on to the type 7 enthusiasts. The primary triad for the type 7 enthusiast is the head center. Their secondary triad is the gut or body center, and their repressed triad is the heart center. Many 7s don't look like your typical thinking type on the surface, but that's just because 7s embody their ideas, and their actions often overshadow their nuanced mental playground. The 7's core struggle as a primarily thinking type can be summed up in one word: anticipation. Their minds are always in the future, anticipating what they could be doing next. And since the mind and the body are having such a constant interaction, the heart center is left to wither away. 7s often mistake excitement, curiosity, or anticipation as emotion, but it's not. Those are forms of mental stimulation. Sadly, 7s learn from a very young age to ignore their emotions because their primary caregiver was often too busy or distracted to nurture them. However, healthy 7s have learned to sit still with their emotions and the emotions of other people in order to find the true beauty of life within the painful or even seemingly mundane situations in life. All right, that's type 7. Let's move on to the type 8 challenger. The primary triad for the type 8 challengers is the gut or body center. Their secondary triad is the head center, and their repressed triad is the heart center. The way this plays out for type 8s is that they are strongly identified with their physical energy, vitality, and instinctual reactions to life. But when 8s are exhausted or stressed out or feel like people are against them, their instinctual reactions get really unclear, and so they fall back on the gifts of the thinking center. However, average 8s just use the thinking center to be shrewd and strategic about how they can get their power back. The true gifts of the thinking center, which are an open mind, creativity, and objectivity, are not as useful to the unhealthy 8 as the ability to spot weakness or opportunities for self-advancement. Now, while the 8's gut and head centers are playing some real-life version of the game Risk, the heart center is left to atrophy in a pool of past trauma. 8s carry a ton of pain within their heart, and the only way 8s become their best self is by diving into that painful, humbling pool of sorrow so that it doesn't taint their ability to use their power for good. All right, that's type 8 in a nutshell. Last up is the type 9 peacemaker. All right, here's the basic triadic pattern for the type 9 peacemaker. 9s are right in the middle of the gut or body triad centers between types 8 and 1, which means they're the impinged type. All impinged types have the hardest time unlocking the gifts of their respective triad, which in this case are the instinctual reactions of the gut, as well as a feeling of being grounded in the present moment. 9s experience the body as cut off from the head and the heart, so they essentially shift between two modes, functioning mode and daydream mode. Daydream mode is this mixture of the head and the heart that make 9s so imaginative and open-minded and peaceful, but they struggle to do anything with these great characteristics. And instead, they get stuck in the rut of functioning mode, which prefers predictable, mundane tasks and boring or downright abusive relationships just because they're the norm. Unhealthy 9s want to erase themselves from the present moment, and so they use their daydreams to avoid dealing with reality. But healthy 9s have learned that it's okay to take up space in other people's lives, and that their emotions and ideas are worth acting on. Oddly enough, leaning into their subtle pool of anger will actually help 9s bridge the gap between the body and the head and the heart combination. All right, that's almost a wrap on the triadic pattern for each Enneagram type. I've just got one more dot to connect for you real quick that I think is a fascinating parallel to the Triadic Self. These triad centers can also be used to help explain the social patterns of each Enneagram type. If you've watched my whiteboard video on the Hornevian triad, then you already know that there are 3 main groups that describe each Enneagram type's overarching social behaviors. There's the assertive group, the withdrawn group, and the compliant group. Think of it like extroverts, introverts, and ambiverts. Now, when you look at the triad centers that we just covered, you can see that types 4, 5, and 9 all have the instinctive center as their least developed center. They're detached from the body, from taking action, and instead, they go internal to the mind and to the heart, which is what makes them all withdrawn types. Now, when you look at types 1, 2, and 6, you'll see that the thinking center is their least developed center. So they lack a sense of inner clarity, which causes them to look outward to their surroundings or their community or the broader culture at large to know what they should do. And this theme of should is what makes them compliant types. Lastly, when you look at types 3, 7, and 8, their least developed triad center is the heart center, so they're out of touch with their emotions. This drives them to find their identity through their work, through intense experiences, or by overcoming physically challenging situations, which is what makes them all assertive types. All right, apologies if that is just information overload for some of you, but I bring it up because I just think it's fascinating how the many Enneagram theories are all interwoven. And by just studying the details of your particular Enneagram type, you'll eventually learn about the 8 other types by what you have in common with them, not how you're different from them. And that's a crucial part of the Enneagram. It's not about delineating how you're different from other types and objectifying them. It's about finding how you're similar and how you can relate and empathize with everybody, no matter what their background or personality or ego is telling them. All right, it's enough preaching from me. I'll end with just saying that if I said something that didn't make sense to you or you need more clarification on, please just drop a comment below and I will be sure to respond to you as soon as I can. Also, if you like this video series at all, please do me a huge favor and like the video or subscribe to the channel, because that really does help us gain more visibility and traction as we fight through this YouTube algorithm that seems so perilous at times. I thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm your host, Colton Simmons, and I hope to see you next time on You've Got a Type.